So either this is the highly dedicated academic educational institution group, or these are the people that can't wait to get a glass of wine. I'm not sure which. We'll find out in a few minutes. Stayed for the glass of wine. Thank you. A realistic group. I'm delighted that you not only came today, but stayed for this wrap-up conversation, and I'm extremely delighted to have this facilitated by John Lombardi. He's got a long bio that we could use to introduce him, but just let me tell you, it wasn't that long ago. He was a professor at Indiana University, but he's probably better known for the provost, president, chancellor types of roles he's held at Louisiana State, University of Florida, right here at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where he's back now and hangs out in the building just down the corner here in the library, and prefers now to be returned back to calling him just Professor of History. I'm delighted that he could be here with us today. He's going to take a little bit of time to give you his 2 cents on some of what's gone on and take some questions from you. Please give a warm welcome to John Lombardi.
Thank you. Well, it's a great pleasure to be with the diehard group. I always can tell who the good people are is because they stay to the bitter end, or else they got nothing better to do. I'm not sure which it is, but in any case, I assume it's because you're smarter than most. Now, one of the things that occurs to people like me who spend a lot of time, up with deep thinkers. Well, they say they're deep thinkers. People who think big vision about the meaning of life and the structure of the universe, is we forget, or they forget, that the universe is run by people who actually do things. And the people who actually do things are people like you. So one of the things that I learned wandering around in and out of some of your sessions is that the people who do things are actually doing some pretty interesting things. Now, one of the characteristics of the work that you do, which is dramatic in a way, is that you spend an enormous amount of time and energy worrying about individual students. That is, you worry about student A and student B and student C who has this problem and needs to be fixed and needs to be helped and needs to be assisted and needs to be mentored and needs to be whatever it is they need. You take it as your personal responsibility to figure out what it is these students as individuals need. Whereas as you go up the scale of administrative deep think, one of the things you find is that everybody talks in aggregates. They talk about students in aggregates, assuming that the aggregate is what matters. Well, in the end, of course, it is what matters. It does matter that we graduate as many students as possible. It does matter that we retain as many students as possible. It does matter that you advise and counsel as many students as possible so they're a success. But at the same time, when you focus on all of those numbers, you forget about the complexity of the process that is buried in the number. So when you say, well, we want to have completion and we want to have access and we want to have all students who show up succeed and we want to have student success, everybody nods as if we're dealing with some kind of assembly line process that takes some kind of raw material and puts it through a known process that if we just turn the crank at the right speed, we're going to spit them out at the end and they're all going to be student successes. Not recognizing that the material we receive into our enterprise is extraordinarily varied with a zillion different characteristics, issues, opportunities, skills, values, deficits, whatever it is, and it's your job and the enterprise that you manage to sort them in a way that allows them to go through this standardized process, which produces bachelor's degrees or some other kind of certificate, which is very standardized, right? And you take this material, which is very complicated and very difficult, and you transform it into a process that allows them to take advantage of this standardized production process. Now, people often imagine that because American higher education is very complicated and complex and has a zillion different institutions, that it is a very complex and varied enterprise. It's not. It's an extraordinarily standardized enterprise. The most standardized enterprise in the world is American higher education 4-year degrees. And you go out and you look at the websites of all these universities and colleges, and they put on their website, we are the most unique, we're the most wonderful, we're the most different, we're the most special, we're the most terrific. And after you get through that PR junk and you look at what they actually teach, you find that they all teach Chemistry 101, and they all teach English 101, and they all have a core curriculum, and they all do the same thing. And they do that because we have accreditation. That's a curse in my view, but that's a different issue. We have accreditation that ensures that whatever the fad of the moment is, we propagate it rapidly throughout the higher education environment. We have the same educational process because we're producing students, many of whom will end up going into various kinds of graduate programs for master's or professional degrees, which expect from the 4 years a standardized input product. And so as a result, what you do is you transform this extraordinarily varied population of students who enter into people who can take advantage of this highly standardized educational product and walk out the door claiming themselves a success, and we claim them as a success. And this is very difficult. Now, the way we know it's difficult is that we old people, and there's none of them here who are as old as me, I don't think, but we old people remember what it used to be like. We used to not care about the students, right? We assumed that the students showed up to take advantage of this privileged opportunity that was participating in a 4-year college or university, and they damn well ought to do what they damn well ought to do and get in my class and do what they're supposed to do and then get the hell out and go do something else. And if they don't survive, that's not my problem. Not my problem, right? It's their problem. Okay? Now, what has happened? Do you know if we had had this meeting when I first started to teach, there'd have been 3 people in the room whose job it was to worry about students and student characteristics and student adjustment and student engagement, A, because we didn't care, and B, because the students themselves were much more homogeneous than they are now. Much more homogeneous than they are now because we excluded the ones that weren't. It was very effective. You know, I mean, that's how you get it easy, right? You exclude difficulty. That's how it works. Well, what has happened? We invented access. The minute we invented access, it changed the world. Because now we started having people having a right to enter the university, and then we assumed an obligation to produce some kind of successful outcome from that experience. And as we had access, and we celebrated we had access, then we discovered once we accessed them, right, that they weren't all the same, and we had to deal with them differently, so we hired another person like you. And then we hired 2 more people like you, and then we had 5 more people like you, and then we had 12 more people like you, and pretty soon we could have a conference with 400 people. Okay? Because we need the kind of effort that you produce. Now, the second thing that old people notice in this process is that higher education is one of those enterprises that never is done, right? It's never fixed. Okay? No matter what you think you're doing, you crusaders and true believers out there who are 25 or less, right? You believe you're going to fix it, but you ain't going to fix it. I got news for you. You're going to make it better, but you're not going to fix it. Right? And the goal of this enterprise is to continuously and constantly and forever improve and improve and improve the enterprise, recognizing that you'll never get it right. And you'll never get it right for 2 reasons. One is the problem's too big. Right? The problem is too big, right? There are too many people who need to get educated. There are too many people who have deficits in their own background that make getting educated hard. There are too many people for whom we provide the wrong kind of education to begin with. So we're not going to fix it, but we sure as hell can make it better. And what I learned today, going around listening to all of you, is that we have the right people in the room doing this kind of stuff, because every one of you is inventing programs and activities and stuff that improves what's happening in your place. It improves it piece by piece and piece by piece. And as soon as you think it's getting right, the minute you think it's getting right, the world's going to shift. Right? It's going to shift. It's going to be interested in some other damn thing that is not on your agenda right now. Right? And the universities is all of a sudden going to have to jump up in the air and go like this and do something else. Who heard of STEM 15, 20 years ago? Nobody heard of STEM. Then all of a sudden, true believers, we got to have STEM, so we're out there with 1 billion STEM programs, okay? Because it's God's work coming from the government, and so we have to do God's work coming from the government. Well, you got to wait for what the next God's work is going to come, because it's coming down the track. We're not sure whether it'll be Republicans' God work or Democrats' God work, but it'll be somebody's work, and politicians, by definition, have to do something different. They never give you enough time to fix what it is they've identified as a crisis, before we have a new set of politicians who aren't about to endorse the things of the old politicians. And so they come up with a new thing, and they rearrange the money, and we have to jump around and change and readjust. And fortunately, you have your focus on the right thing, which is the students. You have your focus on the right thing, which is trying to get the students right. And so you will adjust to whatever the noise is at the upper level that's accompanied by money. You will adjust to that relationship and still stay focused on the students that you're trying to manage and help and improve and enhance. And so when I come to an event like this, because I don't live in the student affairs world, I just brag about your success. You know, when I had an occasion to brag in public, I get to brag about your success, but I never did anything, all right? But when you come to a place like this and listen to what it is that you do, and listen to the way in which you engage each other and the way you test your hypotheses and the way you try to learn from each of the examples, which are quite different because they refer to different institutions with different student populations and different kinds of outcomes anticipated. Nonetheless, what you see is this community of people who are sharing information and knowledge and technique and skill and enhancing in this incremental way that we build great American universities, the set of achievements and access and success that we all want to have for our students. So I'm here in part to congratulate you on this enterprise. Now, I've spent a lot of time wandering around higher education. Some of it interesting, some of it complicated, some of it confusing, some of it weird. But in any case, I thought possibly it might be useful for those of you who are interested in this messy world that we're in, to give you an opportunity to ask me questions about anything at all that has to do with anything at all having to do with American higher education. And let me say, there's one part of this conversation that I've listened to today that I haven't heard much about, which is actually fairly significant. And that is what is going to happen to the leader enterprise of higher education, which is the big-time research universities. You all have been working with the students, which is what you're supposed to be working with. But in American higher education, it is the research universities that drive the agenda. Whether we like it or not, whether we approve of it or not, right, the story that we have comes down from the research university, and they are the slowest to pay any attention to students. Right? They pay attention to graduate students sometimes. But basically, they are the slowest to be interested in the kinds of things that you all talk about, and yet at the same time, they create the norms and the standards and the prestige structure that we all work with, that we all have to work with. There's no escape from it. We can say it's bad. We could say they shouldn't be given that privilege. We can say it's inappropriate. And then we go to the marketplace, and the marketplace lines up first to be at the highest level university they can manage, and second to be the next highest university they can manage, and third to be at the next highest university they can manage. Right? So the power of the elite, highly selective research universities in determining the world in which we all live and engage is very significant, and it's very powerful. And some of you have talked about it with sort of en passant and on the side, saying, well, the faculty this and the faculty that, and the faculty is the core of the university. Yeah, the faculty is the core of the university, but the faculty value is driven by the top-level research universities. They define that value, and they still do, in spite of all the efforts we've made to undermine it and weaken it and, you know, subvert it and all that. Doesn't make any difference, right? And there are people who leave that environment and come down and talk about other things, but they leave that environment. They didn't start here, they started up there. And then they find a place and they're useful to the rest of us, okay, sometimes. But you want to always keep in mind that that is the center, right, of the higher education enterprise, is those institutions. And because they're unchangeable, because they're so powerful, and because they're so rich, okay, they ain't moving, right? They move very slowly. So you circle around them doing God's work, which is very important. And you've made tremendous advances. But at the same time, you always have to remember that you're speaking ultimately in some way or another to that core business that is the big American research university. Now, I tell you all this because I spent a lot of my life evaluating those people, and I know them better than I would prefer to know them. And so I just want to put that little stake in the ground so that while you do the good work that you do and you wonder why it's so hard to change certain things, one of the reasons it's so hard to change is that your core faculty are all looking up there for the reference points for what is quality, what do we determine faculty promotion and tenure, what is the hallmarks of academic excellence, right? The hallmark of academic excellence for the faculty member is not student success. Right? Now, you're doing a lot to try to get them to pay attention to it, but that doesn't mean they agree that the hallmark of academic excellence is student success. They hope we get student success by maintaining the hallmark of academic excellence being research, publication, and that kind of stuff. Okay? That's where the game is played. And it's like saying I want to play football, but I don't want to play like Michigan. No. If you don't play like Michigan, you ain't playing football. Okay? Because that's the game. That's the game. Right? And we can make it better. We can improve it. We can give other people access to the game. We can enhance the way the game is played and showed and involved and engaged in one thing and another. We can prevent concussions. We can do all kinds of stuff. Right? But the game is the game. And the game we have in higher education is driven by those folks at the top who are, the SEC of academic work. So with that, I'm going to take questions from anybody about anything. I'm trying to be difficult so you'll get mad and ask a question. Don't be shy.
Hello, my name is Kim Sauerwein. I'm at Colby Sawyer College, and for those of us, I know there are a number of people here who are in doctoral programs who are seeking to be a part of the not fixing but working on. And what advice would you give to people who are thinking about a doctorate or want to be a part of that system to change the system?
Well, the doctoral program, of course, is the touchstone of the enterprise, right? That's how we determine whether you can belong to the guild or not. Okay, and if you can't do in that doctoral program what guild people want you to do, then you ain't in the guild. And so while you're doing the doctoral program, you have to say, what is the guild skills that are required to be a full-time member? I used to tell my class that, academics are like silversmiths. Right? It's like a silversmith guild in the Middle Ages. And in a silversmith's guild, you enter as an apprentice in the silversmith's guild. And you study under the masters, and you learn how to, melt a metal, and you learn how to pound it out. And after a while, they let you make a plate, which is flat, and easy. So you make a plate, and if it sits flat and it's okay, and they say, okay, you can make a plate. And then they move you on, and then you make something else. And pretty soon, it's about time for you to enter the guild. So they say, you have to make a teapot. A teapot's hard because the handle can't be hot, right? And it can't fall off when you pour the tea, right? This is critical. And so consequently, you have to make a teapot that the handle doesn't fall off and it pours the tea properly. And if you do that, that tells the guild that you have acquired the skills that are appropriate to a silversmith, and you can now start out at the lowest rung of the silversmith guild, right? Like assistant professor kind of person in the silversmith's guild. Okay, and then you work and you make more fancier stuff, and they move you up and fancier stuff, and pretty soon you make a samovar, a great big elaborate silver thing, and then you're a full professor with tenure. Right? Every university has in its doctoral program, that is a guild-driven process of testing whether or not you have the skills that are appropriate for that guild to compete in that guild according to the standards and methodologies and process of that guild. So it's real simple-minded how to deal with a Ph.D. program. You say, what does the guild want of me? Can I do what they want of me? And can I get it done in time that I don't go broke and die? Yeah. What else we got? There we go.
Hi. So you're talking about the game and obviously working within the existing structures of academia, and many of those are hierarchical, patriarchal, privilege-driven structures, and a lot of us in this room would probably identify as being change agents in terms of social justice and things like that. what advice do you have for walking that line between playing the game and dismantling the game from within?
Well, I think the process of change, which we've had discussed here rather well, I think the process of change is complicated and messy and essential. And I think if you're a revolutionary, right, and you want to really upset the apple cart, you can have a good time trying. Okay, you can have a good time trying for a while, and then you wear out and you need to go someplace else and try again or whatever. All right, but the way you get real change in the university is to get inside it and undermine it. Okay, you get inside it and you function in accord with the center line of the university and start moving it. And you start moving it. Now, Lombardi's rule of institutional change, which is not popular, Lombardi, like many of Lombardi's ideas, Lombardi's idea of institutional change is this. If you look at an institution's behavioral profile, right, what you have is a normal curve. Okay, you have a normal curve. Over here, you got the reactionary weirdos, okay? Over here, right, you have the revolutionary firebrands, right? And everybody is trying to change the center line of the distribution and move it over, right? So they all attack the center of the distribution. But that's where everybody is. That's where all the resistance is. That's where all the tenured professors are. That's where the old senior administrators with big salaries that don't want to lose them live, right? They're all there in the center. So the way you win the war is that you add people to the leading edge of change one at a time, people who want to do something different. You encourage them and you add them to the leading edge, and you let that trailing edge disappear. Right? You don't attack them, just let them die out. Okay? Just let them fade away and put all your energy into adding strength and interest and enthusiasm to the leading edge. And then you'll get lots of allies. Because everybody's in favor of the leading edge if they don't have to be on the leading edge. Right? This is the key. Because normally we say to the faculty, we say, you should be out there holding hands and singing songs with every disadvantaged student in America. Okay? And the faculty say, oh, that's a very good idea. And then they go have a drink and say, what the hell is that? I ain't doing that shit. Okay? No. What you say is we have an opportunity for you out here on the edge. We have some fun stuff for you to do, and it's voluntary. It's voluntary. And so then they go on a leading edge and have a good time, and now you got 5 people instead of 1 person. Then you have 20 people. And then you wake up in the morning, and that center line, right, that was the norm, has moved. It has moved. All right, now this takes a little while, and it's incremental, but it is powerful, because as soon as that center line moves, it'll stay there. Right? It'll stay there. Otherwise, what you do is have a revolution on the edge, and everybody says, yeah, that's great, it's wonderful, tough stuff, yeah, blah, 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 yeah, and then it fades away. So none of you have lived through the late 60s and the early 70s. You all weren't even born then, okay? But in the late 60s and the early 70s, we believed we were going to change the university completely. We were going to transform it. We were going to bring social justice. We were going to open the place up. We were going to transform the standards. We were really going to do it. And we had real war. I mean, we were something else. I mean, we locked the place down and shook them up and kicked them around and did all kinds of terrible things. We were going to undermine promotion. We were going to undermine tenure. We were going to put the students in charge. I mean, it was just going to be something else. And that lasted about 4.5 years. Right? And today, nobody remembers. Nobody remembers. Promotion and tenure committees are constructed exactly as they were before 1968. I mean, we did a few things, mostly because some laws were passed that required us to, treat people fairly, right? Not because we did it, but because the law said we had to do it, so we get sued. So I said, oh, shit, we have to do it. So I got nice, okay? But the point I'm trying to make is that the way you change these kind of powerful structures is to do them incrementally. Now, there's one other fact about change. Universities don't change a lot of people fast, okay? Well, if you're in business and you want to change, you just fire a bunch of people, right? They're gone. You bring in new people, right? That's what you do in business. Universities, that never happens. It never happens. We don't fire a lot of people. It's too much trouble. It's too hard. They're all embedded in one place or another. We just don't do it. So change comes incrementally with 1 professor at a time, 2 professors at a time, 3 faculty members, 3 staff members, 3 right, at a time. Right? So out of a university, it's got 1,200 faculty members, which is más o menos, I guess, what we have here. something on the order of 1,200 faculty members, you're going to rotate at most 5 to 10% a year, right? 5 to 10% a year. And they're going to be scattered in all different disciplines. They're not all going to be in one place. So you take that 5% and you spread it out across the entire institution, it hardly makes a blip, except if you hire people who have the right values and have the right enthusiasm, and you find ways to participate in the hiring process so that you give a little pressure towards people who think the way you want them to think. Right? That's how the change takes place. Yes. Here.
Thank you. So I've always asked myself, and I think I'm not the only one, why is it that the tenured faculty and the most prestigious professors cannot actually teach? And so you talked about the research university and, you know, they're the gold standard and blah, blah, blah. And so now I'm thinking after your soliloquy that the idea of teaching is simply the cart to carry the gold bullion, that it's just an excuse or a vehicle for all that stuff that's going on up there at the top, and really teaching is not the point. It's just a socially endorsed, everybody can agree that that's a good idea, but it's not real. Do you know what I'm saying? That's my question.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I want to accept the premise. I don't think I want to accept the premise that, you know, all the good faculty who do research and are famous are lousy teachers. I mean, that's, you know. Yeah, okay. Look, in a research university, okay, you hire faculty into the bottom of the stack, right, expecting two things from them. The first is that they can teach, and the second is that they can do research. Now, it turns out that in the nature of human talent, research talent is much rarer than teaching talent. Nobody wants me to say that, including me, because I'm a teacher, but nonetheless, it's true, okay? I can get good teachers easily, but getting good researchers is very hard, and especially if I give the people tenure, right? Because they're going to run out of steam maybe sometime before they're through, and then they're not even doing research, okay? Because research is fragile, it's difficult, it's expensive. So research universities, when they get to the point of tenure, right, the bet they make is on research, because they're probably can guess whether they're going to be a respectable teacher. Now, most universities, with some exceptions, most universities will not tenure a faculty member who's a bad teacher, okay? But they won't tenure one who's a lousy researcher at all. Now, it's possible that you can get tenure if you're a pretty good teacher and a good researcher, but you can't get tenure if you're a superb teacher and a lousy researcher. No chance at all, because I can buy that teaching talent outside cheap. That's why we have contingent faculty, okay? You can buy decent teaching talent cheap because all of us can teach, but not all of us can maintain a high-level research program for 20, 25 years. And so as a result, you see in research universities some faculty who are super-duper distinguished faculty who are terrible undergraduate teachers. Those people, if you have them in the undergraduate classroom, you have an incompetent provost and dean, okay? You have an incompetent provost and dean who should have put them in some other function where they don't do any damage to the undergraduates, okay? And you should go out and hire somebody to do the teaching who can do the teaching, all right? And that's what happens in most good universities. That's what happens in most good universities. But my experience is that it is rare to find faculty members who are truly lousy teachers. I mean, we have some who aren't as good as they ought to be, but truly lousy is rare. And the ones that are truly lousy, we either put them in a lab or we have them teach graduate students. Because who cares about the graduate students, you know, man? They can take care of themselves, okay? But the undergraduate can't take care of themselves. So you put a lousy teacher in front of an undergraduate, you do significant damage. And we know we didn't do significant damage. So the thing to do with a lousy teacher is to reassign them to something else. You know, make them a university president or something like that. You know, but get them out of the classroom. All right? And that's what we do in well-ordered universities. A faculty member who you kept because he was a great scholar when he was 45, and he's 50 now, and he's run out of steam. Right? He can't get a grant. His idea turned out to be wrong. Right? And he had to have another idea, and you got to take away his lab. So what the hell are you going to do with him? Okay. You hope that he's a decent teacher and you can have him a useful person as a teacher. If he's not a decent teacher, then you got to find something else for him to do, but you have to keep him out of the classroom. That's how we run the store when we have a chance. Now it's your turn. I'm sorry.
Thank you. You've talked a lot about the things that we can do. Standing on the leading edge, I mean, one of the things in change is to refrain from doing the wrong thing. So my question to you is, in your experience looking around, what are the wrong things? If we really are interested in student success, what are the wrong things that we do that we should stop doing?
Well, I don't know that you're doing a lot of wrong things. I think the issue of student success in the current moment, we're in a moment in which the expectations and the enthusiasm and the idea of student success is running ahead of our capacity to cope with what it takes to achieve that student success. And so that groups like this and people who are doing what you're doing are having a heroic task trying to catch up with the public expectation that it's possible to take as almost an entitlement anybody who wants to enter post-secondary education and transform them into a student success. That's the expectation of the public. Right? That's out there in the subtext of all this political conversation about graduation and completion and all that. The assumption is that there's an entitlement. That means anybody who walks in the door, for whatever method they end up in the door, they have a right to get success. Okay? And so now that we have that expectation, we turn to you and we say, can you make that happen? And you say, geez, this isn't easy. And we say, well, it should be, and now I got to go to give a speech and do something else. Okay? And so I think you're not doing anything wrong. I think you're doing all the right things, but not enough of them. Right? Not enough of them because there isn't enough resources and enough time and there aren't enough people, and you have a lot of unrealistic expectations in the public. Huge unrealistic expectations about what you can do with the people who show up at the door. Of the people who show up the door, if 100 people show up at the door, you can probably, using all of the wonderful techniques here, if you all adopted all the things that work that you heard about in this conference and you did them all, you could probably help 60 to 70 of those 100. Right? But there's 30 of them you're never going to get, at least not right away. And so part of the thing you have to be sure you can do is not oversell the things that you can accomplish with the techniques that you know work under some circumstances with some people at some time. And I think the danger we all do in higher education is that we promise what we can't deliver because the ideal type is terrific and everybody believes in it. But it's not realistic to assume that everybody who comes out of these places that show up in our entry hall are people who are going to all succeed no matter how wonderful we are. Now, how terrific we are, how capable we are, what the techniques we use, all of the mentoring and other good things we do, we're still going to lose some people from the success track. We're going to lose them, okay? And we shouldn't promise that we're going to get them all done if somebody would just, cheer as we move down the pike. And so part of it is trying to be realistic without giving up the goal and the dream. And that's a tricky balance because people assume if you're being realistic, you're being negative. No, you're not being negative. You're trying to recognize that people working 24 hours a day doing hand-holding one-on-one with so many of these students are going to be able to do all 100. No, they're not going to reach all 100. Right? If you're reaching 50 now and you reach 55 tomorrow and you reach 60 the day after tomorrow, that's a hell of an achievement. That's something to celebrate. That's something to be triumphant about because it's changed the world. Right? But 100, you're not going to get 100. Right? You're not going to get 100. I've been in this business a long time, and we've promised a zillion things in my lifetime to our many constituencies, and we have never delivered 100% on any of them, right? Because they've been unrealistic promises. They've been unrealistic promises. That's the only thing you're doing wrong.
John, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
On the off chance you didn't have something to discuss with each other before now you have something to talk about when you go out and have a glass of wine And I bet if you buy John a glass, he'll talk with you a little bit more. Thank you so much for your attendance today, your participation. Drive safe on the way home. Feel free to hang out, and these tables will be open as well. Enjoy the rest of the evening.